This is Lough Erne. At over 50 miles in length, it's one of Ireland's largest lakes, and there's more than 150 islands on it. Very few of these islands are inhabited today, but in bygone years many of them were, some having just one family in residence. And it's to just such an island that we're going today, Aughinish Island, the ancestral home of the Murphy family. Living on your own island might sound idyllic in today's crowded world, but for the Murphys 100 years ago, it would have been quite a lot of hardship. For a start, in order to go anywhere, you'd have to do this first: row. And they had a fair distance to row to the mainland. And if the wind was against you, it could take quite a while just to get there. And of course, once you got there, you'd have to walk to wherever you were going. This whole island is overgrown, and there's rushes all the way around the shoreline. We had to come around a little further and we found a spot to stop at where we could get through the rushes and onto the island. And this is the first time after coming through overgrown areas that we see a field. So this would have been probably a much bigger field than it is now, but you can see how it's encroached. There's 75 years around that since this was last farmed. So this field would have been much bigger, and probably it would have had nice grass on it rather than all these rushes. So let's go on and see if we can find where the house is. Let's go this way. Oh, and I see the house. That's the house right over there. You can just get the gable wall of it sitting right there. An upstairs window. It's actually a bigger house than I expected. It would have had an upstairs. Let's see if we can find an entry. Oh, this is opening out now. So here we are. This is it. Everything is completely overgrown. And we have cattle on the island. There's quite a few cattle, and I'm actually following one of their trails. So this now would have been the Murphy residence. The main house on the island, the hub of all the activity, and blow me down, it's a traditional Irish cottage with a red door, whitewashed walls, tin roof. That would have been at one stage a thatched roof, so you can imagine what that would have looked like. The house is actually quite a size. Let's see if we can get in. Anyone got a key? Let's go around the other side. And right here we can see one of the outbuildings which lies tight against the house on the gable wall. This probably, almost certainly would have been a byre of some description for cattle, and it looks like there's no way around here. Ooh. So you can see here, this would have been the entrance to what is a very small building. In fact, I'm wondering, yep, this is definitely not an outhouse. This would have been the original dwelling house. It's much smaller than this one. We can tell because it's got two windows, and I would pretty much bet that there's a fireplace up on the gable wall there. This is probably the original house that was built by the Murphys around the late 1830s. We know that the house was here in the 1840s. They had moved on here. Terence and his wife had moved onto the island, and Hugh would have been a small boy at that time, and this is probably where they first moved into on this island. This would have been their home. Now let's see what we can find. Can we make it through here? I think we can. Ooh, it's tough on the clothing. So this is an open area. And this would have been the main drag. There's signs of another building here. This would have been the main route that they would have walked up and down. There's a building there which probably was used for livestock or possibly as a second home. This house would have been built later than this one, and there's another third building sitting right here. There's not a lot left of it. And it's a very small building. My guess is the external measurement on that is no more than 10 feet. Oh, wait now, this is a door. It's much bigger than I initially thought. Okay, so now we have three buildings. This is the main building, and this would have undoubtedly been the latest one because it's whitewashed. It's got a tin roof. It probably originally had a thatch roof. It's got glass in the windows. So when the Murphys left the island in 1942, this would have been their main dwelling. This smaller building on the side is probably the first building that was built, along with this one here. So we have two buildings that are probably too good to be livestock houses. So this is showing us a doorway here that faced this way into the main path that runs between the two buildings. And this would have been a dwelling house almost for sure. Narrow door. Door would have come to here, so it's about 3 foot wide. And I'm sure if we went in there, we'd find a fireplace somewhere on one of those walls. Okay, there's a lot more space around the front. And this is the front door. So this would mark the main approach to the house. Hello? Nobody home. It's got a nice secure door with a keyhole. Hasn't been used in a few years. Now here's an interesting plaque that someone has put here in memory of Philip, Kevin, John and Betty Murphy, loved and missed by family and friends. Interesting. That would suggest that the last Murphys that lived on this island were Philip, Kevin, John and Betty. But there's a job for ancestry.com to sort out. Excellent. Now, well, unfortunately, we can't get in because the front door and the back door are both locked. And this looks like a new door frame. So we certainly can't break in. No idea who might have the key, but this is the place that the Murphys grew up and lived on this island. Amazing. And this would have been their view out from their front window. I'm sure all these trees wouldn't have been here. We can see a meadow in the distance. And this would be the path down to the lake. Shall we take a walk? Oops. So we can see here very clear evidence of a pathway. The cows use it now, but there's a slightly raised bank on both sides. So this would have been the main road, the main pathway from the house to the lake. And this is a road that the Murphys would have walked countless numbers of times as they went to take a boat, to go to school, to do the shopping, to go to church, social events, visit friends. They would have walked this many times. See, the badgers have taken it over now. Or is that a fox or a rabbit? Now, the house was actually quite far inland from the shore. And here we are now getting within sight of the shore. And we do know that there's a well somewhere on this side of the lane, but it's almost certainly overgrown and disappeared. We can have a little look for that later. And here we have the edge. This is the edge of the overgrowth, and now you can see the land extending out to the water. Nice friendly looking cow. Now, there was evidence of a structure right here on the 1900 map. And let's see if we have anything. This is natural. It's just a piece of flotsam. In fact, I think it's a tree that's been felled right here. Here's the stump. But no sign of a building. Lough Erne was drained in about 1881, and the level was lowered by 4 to 5 feet. So when you look at this foreshore, you can see that the lake would originally have come all the way up to here, and when you look on the old map you can see 2 shorelines. And of course this is the spot that they would have pulled their boat up at, but we had no hope of coming through here because it's completely overgrown. This tree may well have marked the original shoreline. It might have even been lower. There's a little dip right here, and that may well have been a place where they brought their boats in and tied them up. In fact, we can see rocks here on both sides of it. Let's see if there's any evidence of human activity here. And we do have a row of rocks going back all the way to there, sitting along there, and it's very possible, and these rocks actually look like they're set in one against the other in a row. So this may well be the original jetty that the Murphys came into and tied the boat up in. We have more rocks on this side, a few less. Oh, here's some more over here. Look on this. Right here, this is all strewn with rocks. Both sides of this little dip. And that may well have been their original harbour for the island. It's marked actually on a 1900 map with the word quay, Q-U-A-Y. So there would have been something here at that time. And this is probably it. Now let's walk back up to the house and see what we can see.
The Murphys' decision to move to Aughinish may well have saved their lives. Just a few years later, the potato famine hit Ireland, killing 1 million people and causing a further 1 million to flee the country. In just 3 years, Ireland lost 20% of its population, but the island dwellers of Lough Erne escaped most of it. Why? Because the airborne fungus that caused the potato blight didn't travel well over water.
Living here 100 years ago would have involved considerable hardship, a lot of hardship. Just imagine it. No neighbours, no electricity, no running water. And just to heat your house you had to burn a fire, and all the wood had to be cut by hand. Or you had to go to the mainland, buy turf, load it in a boat, row it across and carry it up here to the house, basket after basket. And probably money would have been scarce to buy things like turf. There's only 24 acres of farmland on this island, and I'd imagine most of what they produced went on feeding themselves. So what we have here is 3 dwelling houses in close proximity, one on the other side of the main path, 2 on this side, almost touching. So I'm presuming that those 3 buildings were for human habitation. We've got a 4th building. There's only 4 buildings that we can identify, and it's a little way off from the main house. And my assumption is that it might be for livestock. It's quite a large building, and it may well have been for animals. It's about 15 feet, maybe a little more, 20 feet in length. And it's the oldest ruin, or one of the oldest ruins on this island. Look at the size of this tree that's actually grown up inside the walls. And just the last 2 feet of the walls are visible. And then right at the end, the door was here, and there was another door into a separate room that seemed to have a lower floor, and it's a very small room, about 10 by 8. And that might have been possibly an area when cows are in the byre, you've got to wash the slurry down into a lower. I'm not sure. I doubt if that's the case, but this room was used for something because it's something specific, because it's got a lower floor level than the main house. Young Hugh Murphy was the first child to grow up on this island, and on the 10th of June 1866 he married Julia Martin. She was just 11 years old. Now that might sound extreme today, but back then the legal age for marriage was 12, and who was going to argue over a few months here or there? 5 years later they had their first child, and for another 70 years the Murphys continued to live in this island right up until 1942, when they left this island for good. Since then, it's been uninhabited.